So I'm taking a little bit of time to build my palette. It's very important to build your palette. I think one of the best, most important steps you can do as an artist is to take your time and build the proper palette, because that is where everything that's touching the canvas is coming off of your palette. And so it's very important to have your colors or clean and pure, and so that you're putting down very good intense color, and also to have your chemistry, which I put in these little cups here that I think I explained yesterday on my little palette. And see, this is what my palette looks like. I have titanium white, zinc white, cadmium light, yellow light, cadmium yellow light, cadmium medium yellow, yellow ochre, cadmium medium red. What is this color called? I keep forgetting this color. Alizarin. This is alizarin crimson. Burnt sienna, emerald green, viridian green, cobalt teal, cerulean blue, cobalt blue, ultramarine blue, and also do this purple color here, which I thought I broke it out. Dioxazine, I'm really starting to like this. Dioxazine purple. And I just put like the size of a pea of some of these colors on my palette, because I don't intend to use them that much. But the colors I do use the most is going to be cadmium lemon yellow, titanium white, cadmium medium yellow, and cadmium medium red. I use those colors quite a bit. And ultramarine blue. Those are my favorite colors. And cobalt blue too. So those are my number one kind of go-to colors that I tend to go to and mix a lot of colors. And then when I can't get the colors I need with that, in comes a little bit of the alizarin crimson. There's not really crimson. It's alizarin crimson that you can buy from the Gambling Company. These are the paints that I use, Gambling. I don't know if you can see that. Let me try to hold it still so you can see it. These are the colors that I use. And the paints that I use called Gambling. They're really nice because they're bio-friendly. And their cost is pretty in the middle. They're not very expensive and they're not very cheap, but toward the very affordable side. So they are quite a nice balance. I think the company does a very, very good job to make sure artists get quality products that's not going to kill them. That's very important. You don't want stuff that you're just slowly poisoning yourself over time. Okay, and then also this is the Galkit medium made by the same company, Gambling. And I put like a dime in 1 cup. So I put about a puddle of a dime in the bottom of 1 cup. That's really all I need for about a 4-hour session. And that's what I usually do before I clean my palette. I go about 4 hours and I clean my palette. I also use a little bit of Gambling. It's their version of refined linseed oil as well. And I just put like a green pea, drop of that in there. Or if I put a dime of the other stuff, I'm putting a green pea drop with just a few drops in here. So it's mostly Galkit. I do this because actually I put this in to slow it down, but also for some reason I like the smell of Galkit linseed oil, a Gambling linseed oil. I just like the smell. When people come into my studio, for the few who do actually come into my studio, it just smells like oil painting is in here, I feel when they do come in, I feel more like a painter, like you're in an artist studio. So it's important to me anyway. And what's important to me means that if I'm happy about something, I'm going to paint better. And that's what it all boils down to. I think people paint out of their conviction, out of their emotions. And so if you feel good about what you're painting, you're just going to paint better. And that's the best way to get better at painting, is to feel good. And it's going to cause you to paint more. You paint more, you're just going to get better faster. Simple as that. Just like anything else. The more you do it, the better you're going to be. The less you do it, you can improve, but you're not going to improve as quickly, or perhaps not as much. But, like I say, some people just improve at faster rates than others. So don't be upset when one person is achieving something and the other one doesn't. But you can get there. You just have to put in more time. So I just want to say hi to everybody. Imhotep Asar, what's up? Sharifa, Abdullah, Walter Beach, how's it going? Our brothers, what's up? What's up? Yes, I'm back in my studio again, doing my thing. Basically, this is day. Actually, I skipped a day because of my uncle's funeral. He was like 87. He's a good man. Even in the coronavirus, my family said, "Forget that. We coming anyway. Virus can't stop us." Everybody was hugging and kissing and slobbering over each other, as we usually do. So hopefully we are going to be safe. So let's hope so. But in the meantime, I'm back in my studio, kind of getting myself going, and I am going to be working randomly at this point because I basically have paint everywhere, and I'm pretty happy about most things that I have down here on the actual paint. So I'm just going to be going wherever I would and just kind of testing areas. Like I can test it. I just painted this yesterday, and that's dry. Even though I mixed my medium to basically last 36 hours, I worked the area so much that the paint is dry. So, and that's another thing. If you want to get your paint to dry faster, you just work your area more. So I'm going to get out a few brushes to kind of get me going. And these are my core brushes I usually start with. I'm going to leave a couple of core brushes in. And keep the others out. I'm just putting in the ones that I know that I'm not going to need right away. The ones that I'm going to need right away, I'm going to keep those out, which is about, I guess, 7 good brushes. So, all right. And so I kind of have a bunch of little areas I want to kind of deal with. And right now, you know, like I said, it's not about the brush. It's about how the brush is configured and the hairs and how they go. And then, of course, that has to do, especially with older brushes you had over 6 months, perhaps. Or especially with that is how good do you clean your brushes. And I might do a film on that for all you guys that are painters. Oops, I forgot one color off of my palette. That's one of my most important colors, and that is raw umber. So we'll put a little bit of raw umber on because that's usually the first color I start out with. And that's kind of like my sketch color. It's the color that I kind of go in and start kind of getting my start, or getting, you know, kind of putting notes down as to how the other colors are going to go in. I start with raw umber, which is a very dark brown. And it's kind of like a brown with no red in it. It's not a blue brown. It's kind of like a very neutral brown. So I think for that reason, a lot of people like that color because you can lean it toward a warm side by adding red or orange into it. You can lean it on a cool side by adding some version of blue or maybe even a green to it. So what I'm going to do is start like down here because I do have some shadows in these processional workers that I want to kind of start getting in. And I'm going to start getting those in by hitting them, not necessarily with any black in this raw umber, but just straight raw umber. Matter of fact, I said black, and just as soon as I said not necessarily black, I put one little brush tap on it, realized this needs to be darker. So I'm going to add a little Mars black to it. Okay, and I'm going to go right into the deepest shadow area on this character here, who is carrying the processional arc of Ra. And I had some people come by my studio because I had these IKEA desks that I was selling like on a Facebook app. And a gentleman came to my studio. He was a Russian fellow from Russia. I could tell by the accent. And he might even be looking at this video right now. And his name was Boris. And he had a whole lot of very good input for me on my Tupac picture and various other pictures. Because I do paint in different styles. Some of my styles is much more like photorealistic, where I bear it in. I spend a lot of time just really technically rendering a photorealistic. I mean, to do that, you do have to spend some time. I mean, you might spend a good 6 weeks technically rendering a 40 by 60 inch painting. I mean, not even technically rendering something big, like this one, which is 64 inches by 103 inches, but something that's, smaller in contrast to this size. And but the result is people look at it as overwhelmed by your skill in terms of being able to create the illusion of realism. But cameras can do that, and that's what I was telling them. And sometimes what you want is to have something more figurative that's quicker to paint, where instead of painting it in 6 weeks, it takes you 4 weeks, or perhaps even 3 weeks. But for some of this size, it would take 4 weeks, but something that's smaller, perhaps take 3 weeks. So you can do it in half the time, and you see the brush strokes, and it's different than something that's photo rendered, because that looks kind of like heavily processed. It looks like something you could do kind of in Photoshop, with bringing some things in. And a lot of people can do that, have stuff, printed out. And I do have stuff like that, that I've done. But what I found out superior to that, in my opinion, of course, all of this stuff is subjective, is superior to that when you actually get a oil painting and you leave the brush textures in the way you describe the images. When you kind of leave the brush textures in there and you kind of have some impasto, which is you have some 3D relief of the paint off the surface of the canvas. And when you start getting that, the paint takes another interest. So even though he was looking at a painting that was similar to this that I painted with more realism, that was smaller, he couldn't help to look at the big monumental size and the brush and texture. And of course, there's a lot of conversation about that. So if you're going to buy some of my art, perhaps people will have conversations about that. But what happened was he commissioned me to do a piece for him. It wasn't a commit piece because he said, he's got actually like a little hip-hop studio. He's a Russian guy, but he knows a lot about hip-hop, stuff like that. And he's got like it looks like a hip-hop studio somewhere around town, or maybe his home studio or something. And he commissioned me to do a piece with, like, say, maybe 4 people and himself, and a particular genre, a particular background that has to do with hip-hop. But he had a lot of great ideas of people he wanted to see, perhaps in like a hip-hop painting like that that's more up-to-date and relevant. And I just wanted to know what you guys thought in terms of me investing my time. I'm going to paint everything that I want to paint now. I'm going to do that. But it's just a question of which should I paint first, which should I paint second, which should I paint third, because that's going to be the difference in what I can get before the summer's going good, and then what gets in the gallery first, and what gets in there second and third. So would you rather see more Kemet paintings like this, or would you rather see some more hip-hop paintings, or would you just rather see like a couple on the beach, in a park in love, and looking at each other in a nice little genre kind of thing, where it's something that you could put on your living room, as an individual in your home, you would want perhaps to put something like that into your living room. Whereas something like this is very busy, it has a lot in it, and a individual, especially an individual that's not really heavy into Kemet, that don't have a lot of knowledge of Kemet, they might be a little slower to purchase something like this to put into their home, especially with this size. And this painting right here is not necessarily meant to go into a home. It's actually meant to go into a gallery or museum, a substantial gallery or museum, by the way. And that's why I want this to be. So that's why I'm painting this. And that's why I kind of like this scale, because my whole idea is I want to make pieces that is intended to go, not necessarily to sell as much. I do want to sell. And I could sell reprints. The reprints are quite affordable. So if people only have like $100, $50, something like that, $200, $500, you can definitely get quality art prints of my work. And they will look pretty good on your living room wall. And some of it, especially like the G clay prints of my work, looks very, very similar to the original oil paintings. And if you're not like a top pro professional, you might not even be able to tell. And they're quite affordable. It takes a painting that might be worth about, say, $2,000 to $5,000. It might make it worth $500 to $600 or something like that. And now, if you think that's too expensive, let me know, because I like to get my paintings in the hands of regular folks. I mean, also African American people as well, because a lot of my themes tend to be more African American. But you know, when you're trying to find a market, when you're trying to find a people, because I do have a lot of African American ideas, but at the same time, you do want to make your stuff to sell, and you're going to be an art audience. You want that art audience to cater to, you know, you want your art to cater to the audience. You know, you definitely want to have some people that is really, really enthusiastic about the type of images you make. And you want to find those people and attract to those people. And essentially, if that's what you like to paint, you kind of meet a happy medium where the people who like the kind of work you like to paint is knowing about you. And of course, you know about them. And it, you know, it's generally just a good overall kind of relationship to have that. You know, I mean, that's what every artist kind of wants to achieve. They want to find people in that kind of category. But sometimes it can be a difficult challenge to find that, you know. And you have to be able to, and this is great with social media like this. And so your comments are very, very important. So I would say it's very important for you to just let me know what you like to see. I mean, I know a lot of people, some friends, I ask questions, I say, well, do you buy art? And they say, actually, and I'm over their house, you know, I'm looking around their house actually. And I noticed they have some little things on the wall. But it's a flower, you know. It's a little girl sitting in a meadow, you know, kind of looking out with a little straw hat on, you know, that kind of stuff. Or there might be some angels, but, you know, this African American house, so it's African American angels, you know. And so, you know, you got to say, okay, this is what she bought on her own. I mean, before she met me as an artist, and I'm trying to convince her that she should buy some of my artwork. Now, you know, a lot of times the woman of the home is the one who's actually purchasing the art. Oftentimes that is the case. And unless you're a bachelor, then you're the guy, you know, and you might not be purchasing art. You might be getting posters. Might be purchasing posters. Not necessarily purchasing any particular art. Which is kind of like decorum, you know, you're decorating. But it's not fine art necessarily, by definition anyway, not by definition. So how do you, as an oil painter, get oil paintings into someone's home where that person has got your work on their wall at a price that they really, really are comfortable with, you know? And so that is the big question, I think, for many artists is how do you do that? You know, or should you even try to do that? Should you just paint what you like, and then if they like it, they like it. If they don't, oh well. But you're going to still paint what you like. I mean, what is you guys' impression of an approach on that, you know? And I think a lot of times artists don't do that. They kind of paint for themselves, you know? And I don't necessarily, I like painting for myself. I mean, I must do that. I mean, plus I'm kind of into my career. I was, as you guys might have known, I was a commercial artist first. Graphic artist, commercial artist. And then, but before that, I actually was a fine artist in New York, starving. And I've told this story before. And of course, I didn't like it. It was unpleasant. Nobody likes to literally starve and struggle with bills and all kinds of stuff. I mean, that's a bad feeling. And so at a certain point, you endure and you endure, and then eventually you get frustrated with it. And what happens is you say, okay, I'm a smart person. I can do more than just this, and this is not working out. So I can either be stubborn, stick with it, maybe something might come through for me, or I can change, you know. And sometimes if you can't change, you don't make that evolutionary stride that you should make, and you get left behind. Then other times, if you quit on something too soon, you don't endure to the end, you don't achieve that special mecca, that special place that you could have gone. So those are all like things. And so, like I say, at a certain point in your career, you've worked for the man at the company and the producers and all of the art buyers out there that have product that they're trying to push. And you help them get their product on the shelf or out to the market. You've been doing that for a long time, but then all of a sudden you get to the point where, okay, now what am I doing for me? What is the work that I'm doing that I always wanted to do? You know, that is the tough question. That is the tough question. What is the work that I always wanted to do for me? And I'm kind of like painting a little. This is what you see in the studio right now. You see a hip hop piece for Tupac, and then you see some Kemet pieces, and then you see some African American history pieces. And because I'd like to do African American because they're underrepresented in history, and I'm kind of like an underdog kind of fellow, you know. That's the kind of fellow I am. But at the same time, I want to do pieces that people are going to buy. So that's when I kind of need the advice of you guys, of anyone actually. But if you're coming here and you're listening to me, by all means, leave me a comment or drop me something in my inbox, anything, any communication. You can even call me. My number is on this site. I'm very talkable. Yes, I talk about art a lot, but I talk about everything. So, and I'm not I'm not coming from a certain point of view, so I'm not hard to talk to. I'm very easy. You don't have to talk to me any special kind of way. You know, just be a bud, you know, be a friend. It's kind of how I am, you know. And or if not, you could just kind of observe my work and just come here and just see me. You know, I'm happy with that too. But, you know, how do you get, what would you like to see me do? Because my taste, my love for images, I have a lot of images I want to make. I mean, I can do a whole bunch of images I don't even talk about, type of images. So I won't be changing myself for anything, you know. But I have a whole bunch of different types of images that I could create that I still would be happy with. It's just like, you know, what should I do first? What should I do second? And then so on. So I would appreciate anybody with any. And he was saying like he'd like to see a piece on the hip hop side. He'd like to see a piece with Eminem, 50 Cent, and who else? Eminem, 50 Cent, and Ice Cube. Now, I don't know why that is the case, but Eminem on one side, 50 Cent on the other, and Ice Cube, and 50 Cent in the middle. I don't know if Ice Cube in the middle or 50 Cent, but he kind of said he'd like to see that. But now, I like to know what is relevant. But I think I want to do a piece with Raina. Is that her name? How you say her name? As Maya, or Raina as Isis. I mean, if I'm going to pick a celebrity, I think I like her. I like Beyonce too now. Now maybe I'm too old school for you guys. I mean, I know there's other people that's different. I don't even know all of the younger whippersnappers doing their thing, you know? I kind of like, once I start getting more recluse into my studio, I must admit, I start falling behind with a lot of stuff. You know, it's not that the work that the people are putting out is not good or nothing. It's just that I just start falling behind. I think, shucks, I don't even have cable TV anymore. So, because I found myself, I'm not using it. I said, where am I paying this bill? And I'm not getting anything out of this, you know? So I got rid of it to see if I would, and plus I had like a dish TV or some kind of satellite or something. I got rid of my Verizon, and I don't know why, but I kind of signed a contract for so many years. So once that was up, I just said, forget it. You know, ain't nothing on here that's, and this is stuff is just keeping me away from other things I want to do, because you can easily go sit in your little living room, make you some popcorn, and watch the boob tube and get lost. But likewise, I guess you could just as easily come on to the internet and kind of get lost as well. So I guess that goes a lot of different directions. You know, there's a lot of different directions and different ways you can look at that. Okay, so do a little painting. I started by painting out by just kind of touching on that guy a little bit down there, just to get him just a little bit more modeled. He was looking too linear. He wasn't looking modeled enough for me. So basically like this is built into the shadows a little bit more. The painting is more or less with the attention to the shadows. And also with attention to how the light is coming in from this side on him. And kind of hitting him that way. So right now I'm painting with a little bit more burnt umber to kind of create some shadow from here, but the light is kind of, you see I got light hitting this side of his apron. I'm going to have some more light later when this dries up a little better. That's hitting on that side, but he has this arc over his shoulder that's creating a lot of random shadows on the body. So, and there we go. And of course, this is a dark complexion person. Now with this fella here, he's a little bit darker complected. And I kind of like, I want to paint the light in, or the shadows in, even better on him as well. Because, you know, when you look at this in person, you can just see a few things on it. Again, I'm painting this with, I'm not going to say heavy impasto, but with some impasto. I don't want it to look too like meticulous paintbrush, photorealistic, that kind of look, because I just want to have interesting brush strokes into it and interesting play of lights in terms of the lights and darks on the canvas. And I think it just makes the characters look way more interesting, makes the paint look way more interesting. And a lot of times, like I say, you go to these art galleries and you see the work. Let me see if anybody new's come in. Okay. And you see a little bit more brushstrokes on the old master's work. So, of course, I want my work to also have that. And I think here I see some shadows that I didn't see yesterday that I'm going to paint into this here. Again, I'm using basically raw umber for this because these are skin tones that I'm working with. And these are somewhat melanated individuals. They're not really dark complexion characters, but they are very brown complected. And so I'm basically coming in with raw umber with that tone there. I'm going to get a number 2 round brush now. And I'm going to go back into that same color because I want to put down a little bit more of a bushy tone. And that might have been too bushy of a tone, and I have a tendency to do that when I go back into stuff from the next day. Especially if it's something that I think I want to build in. I've been looking at it for a while and say, okay, that's kind of bothering me a little bit. Sometimes I come in just a little bit too intense. And then sometimes I come in a little bit too wimpy, you know, on it. And but I like these kind of tones like this because the brush strokes are much more unique, I should say. That's the word I want to use for my brush strokes. More unique. And in addition to that, I do come back also with a little towel and try to create a little something there that's interesting there, just to have as an undertone. And of course, when you come with the towel, people say, well, how did he do that brush stroke? They don't realize that I used a towel right there. Or maybe they do. And it don't matter because it's just an interesting looking brush stroke. So that is my towel technique. that I use from time to time as well. Okay, so I'm going to start painting there. And, okay, so now I think, like I said, I'm going to be bouncing around just a smidge. Oops, that's wrong. I'm just going to pull this right up. Because that just was, I didn't realize what color I had there. Sometimes you see something and you got the wrong color on your brush. You don't really have the proper brush available. So you don't get to mix the right color yet. So what you do is you tend to paint, I tend anyway, to paint the color that I have that's near that color. Because sometimes usually tones around the color you want to paint also needs to be painted. You don't just paint just that spot. Sometimes you have to paint the tones around the tones, if that makes any sense. And then finally you can get to the actual tones that you want to paint. For example, like this. Okay, so there we are. We kind of started out the painting session. And I just need to get a little water. Oh, I have some water here. Okay, so now done a couple of touches here and there on that. There's a couple of things I may want to do here Let me just get the right tone on my brush. With that tone there, I just want to kind of blend that a little bit more. Okay, I think that's better. Okay. All right, so yeah, there was definitely some things I was looking at the other day that I want to tackle that I didn't tackle. Actually, those are some of the things that kind of, I mean, I'm not going to say, you know, other people go to sleep worrying about, you know, bills and things like that. I go to sleep worrying about stuff that I didn't paint from the day before, which is, I'm pretty sure it might be different from the average person. A lot of people go to sleep with a lot of other worries. I go to sleep with those kind of worries. You know, I should have painted it that way, and instead I painted it a different way. And I'm mad at myself because I didn't paint it the way that I thought I wanted to paint it. I wanted to paint it a completely different way. Then I want to go back and paint it, but it's 4 o'clock in the morning or 3 in the morning, and it's just too late, so I go back to sleep. So that's the ways I worry. I'm sure that other people don't worry that same way. But I was thinking about, you know, what I could have painted and why didn't I paint it, you know? And I should have painted it that way, but I didn't. And it's always like shoulda, woulda, coulda. And so Okay, now what I need to probably put into this also is the fact that this shadow is actually of the sword is actually coming down the side here. So it's actually hitting here. It's going across here. I'm just going to kind of sketch this in with this dark tone. So let's see, it's kind of going across like this section here. Actually, I think this is a little too low on this belly button here, my edge of my sword. So I'm going to bring it up some. Let me get a bigger brush that's going to make me a more dominant line. Let me look at it. Because there is a shadow going across this part of the hip area that I want in there. I don't want it to necessarily cover what I've already painted, but I definitely want it to be there. But I want it some distance away from the sword, so I don't want it too close to the sword. So I got to figure out where that shadow is going to be. So I think I'm going to kind of sketch that in right now. Then of course it's going to come across his waist this way. So I'm going to bring this a little higher up on his waist. Yeah, I think that's how I want it. And in doing so, I think I'm going to take this tone higher. So let me go ahead and start getting the lighter tone higher first. If I can. Because I'm going to make the lighter tone go all the way over to here of his, kind of like his lower abdomen. Now this is wet. The dark color I just painted in is wet, so I kind of thought of that too late. So the color is starting to get a little muddy, so I'm gonna just paint it this way first to kind of get it in there, to block it in. And I'm gonna let that dry and come in on the subsequent day and repaint it differently. Okay. And now I'm going to just come in with a little bit more warmer tones right by the edge of the shadow. And maybe even some warmer tones down here. I can start painting in. Okay, that's pretty good. And then I'm going to come back with just a glaze, because I'm going to just paint right over this with a glaze. So I don't want a whole lot. So I'm using mostly just a little medium on a somewhat dry brush, and I'm taking this darker tone, this outline that I made, and I'm just kind of pulling it down into this existing shadow area. And it's kind of going over, so it can look like, you know, some of the, this is a classic glazing effect here that I'm doing. The classic sense of glazing. I'm glazing with a very dark color over lighter browns that I painted the previous day. And they're somewhat setting up. Of course, now I don't want this shadow to be that hard of an edge. I'm going to let it set up a little bit before I hit it and kind of soften it up. And then I want this edge of the sickle here, or whatever this kind of shape is. Actually, that's not exactly the way I want it, but I think that's pretty cool the way I have it. Okay, and then I'm going to come across here with just a little glaze across this existing yellow and blue girdle area. Again, I'm going to pull that outline area that I just made, sketch, down into those colors. Now, once I have that kind of done, don't want it to look, you know, cartoony or goofy, but I kind of got the shadow sort of where I want it. And it's darkening those tones. Now, so I can see those tones. So what I do with that is I go back now with a smaller brush and I pick up those tones. See, I already have the black kind of glazed over it. And it's really glazy. So what I do is I go back with these yellows and then I just hit those again. And they kind of blend sort of with the black glaze I have. And it gives the effect that the gloss of the girdle metal, this little yellow color, is kind of pouncing inside of, because it's basically a color it's yellow mixed with black actually. So it's not pure yellow. I'm using kind of pure yellow, but I'm literally just blending it right here on the canvas, just to show you to see, so it doesn't look like just a glaze. So I have a glaze, but now it doesn't look like a glaze because I have it mixing with the black. I'm gonna do the same thing with this orangey color, but this orangey color is like cadmium yellow with cadmium red. It's very, very opaque. So I have to really be very careful about how I paint it. So it just doesn't look like orange just piercing through too much. It looks like, again, orange mixing with black. So now the liquidity of the paint on my brush is just about right. So when I go to drag it, it creates the right blend as I drag the color over the shape inside of the shadow area. And now that I've tackled the colors inside of the shadow, I'm going to clean my brush somewhat and attack the colors outside of the shadow. Okay, which is going to be a little bit more pure and clean. But you do want a soft edge coming into the shadow. You don't want a hard edge into the shadow. So I'm just going to hit this with some of these colors right here next to the edge, just so the shadow doesn't look like it has a really hard edge to it. But again, I don't want to get these particular colors dirty, because then they become like the shadow colors. And there we go. We got a nice little tone going across there. And there is a little bit of a difference in the tone here that I have right now in the original shadow I have. So I'm just going to go into this the same way with just a little bit of brown and just hit it here and there with a few touches. So that will look more interesting as a shadow. Just pick up some little areas here and there. Just pick up the darkness of it so it's not dark uniformly everywhere. It kind of has a little, it's going over a shape that has convexes and concaves in it. And of course the shadow should look accordingly. Now that I had this color sitting there for a minute to kind of set up, because it's really thin, I'm going to soften the edge by simply going over it with this nice soft brush, softening that edge up some. Okay, and that's pretty good. I think I'm going to pick up also just a little bit more of this this tone in here. Just going to pick it up just a little bit more. Don't want to make it too bright though. So I do kind of want it to echo the shape of the sword. Okay, so now you can kind of see the shape of the shadow of the sword go across the body to some level. And of course, what it should do is to get closer to the body as it gets closer to where the hand is closer to the leg. So I'm going to do that. Of course, the sword is thin there. Of course, sometimes you make it a little too wonky, and since the color is dry underneath, I go to my rag, which is my erase tool, and just rub off where I might have made it a little bit too thick in certain areas. There you go. And there we are. We have a shadow that is not so pronounced. That's kind of going right across there. And let's see. Is it doing what I want it to do? Don't know yet. Oops. Since I have these colors blended in, these are not going to wipe up so much because that's wet on wet. That's what I want, a nice, soft kind of shadow going right across this. Okay, so now what we have here is a shadow. I want my shadow straight too. Don't want it crooked. Let me straighten it out some. Okay, now since I don't have any new color over this blue, I can use a little bit of rag to erase. And it gives it like a little bit of a taper to the shadow, to the color, which I like. I don't mind dirtying up some of the color that's underneath. Generally, I would use instead of a paper towel rag, I would use a cloth rag, but I think I might have to dedicate another t-shirt to the cause here. As to my rags is starting to get kind of, where's my main rag at? Well, I kind of misplaced my main rag. I don't want to use this rag yet. So until I get another rag dedicated to my painting, oh, here's my rag. Here it is. And this is a very important art tool as well. To have the proper cotton rag. Okay? Okay, so what I'm doing is just kind of creating this shadow in here that actually goes out. The shadow is going to go kind of like in right to the hand area. And I'm just using just a little bit of raw umber and some Mars black for this shadow. And in this area, a whole lot of blending. With a soft sable brush. And since I do have wet on wet and wet on dry in the same area, I'm trying to be very careful. I'm gonna go back with some wet on wet, and I'm gonna hit some of these little places where glimmer of gold is coming through the shadow here. Okay. All right, so yeah, that's starting to look better. I'm liking that. And now since I'm doing the sword so much, I'm focusing so much on the sword, I really should kind of focus a little bit on the shadow. I'm focusing on the shadow of the sword. I really do need to kind of start the details a little bit better on the actual sword. Because the shadow's looking better than the sword is. So, and like I say, I have to feel the call for that. You know, once I feel the call for that, I will come in with that thing and I will hit it. But right now, I haven't felt that call yet, so I'm just going to kind of chill a little bit with this. Just going to try to chill just a smidge. I'm not going to paint too much else. I mean, there's a ton of things I can paint. I'm always seeing a whole bunch of things I can paint. Especially painting this particular style that I'm painting. I mean, it's just a boatload of stuff that I can paint on. But painting on something, that's a whole different matter. I think I'm going to kind of fill this in some too, because I don't want that bright right there. I do want the paint to be all kind of like an even tone here too. So this gives me a chance to just add a little bit of a glaze to this. Just a little bit of a glaze, not too much. You can always like put another coat on with less glaze on top of that. Give, take, whatever. But let's try that next. Yeah, that looks better. I like that. Actually, that's a pretty good little effect. Okay, so see, it's just a little bit at a time as we slowly start perfecting this bad boy and getting it right, you know, getting everything better and better and better. You know, you just want to just slowly start getting it right. And oftentimes there are glazes. You want to come in and just do a little glazy work. Not a lot. Again, really thin glazes. Kind of unify some of the brush strokes that you did earlier by putting like one nice little glaze to kind of just shift the color just a little bit. It's almost like in Photoshop, adding like a transparent layer, you know, on top of something, or a layer effect over top of another layer. Maybe something like that. To kind of create the tone that you want, you know, and sometimes that goes back and forward until ultimately you get the tone that you're looking after. And of course, the layers should unify the layers that's underneath it to some level at this point. Start unifying the layers more so they don't look like separate, you know, kind of like tonalities, separate ideas about how you're going to apply the tones, but it looks like all part of one thought about how you're going to paint this thing. Again, I think this is some of the stuff that makes your painting textures, tones look much more interesting. Okay, so now let's see what we're going after next. What we're going to go after next is so much I can go after. There's just tons that I can go after. I think I just want to smooth this out some too. I just want to tone this out. Don't want that so hard edge right there. And I don't want this hard edged either. Just want a nice, smooth out look. There. That's good. Sometimes you fool with one area too much and you got all these other areas that you should be fooling with you ain't messing with. So, but it's just so much. Like I say, it's always something that you can see in your paintings that you can work on. You just kind of go round and round until you get done. So, all right, so different areas. I think what I'm going to do now is I'm going to work on her. I'm going to work on her. I'm going to take a small brush, some small brush work here. I'm going to work on her collar today. I've been saying I was going to work on a collar. I never get to work on a collar. I get a couple of my favorite brushes for doing that type of work. And I'm going to get busy on a collar. And hopefully my brushes will behave right now. Let's see, where do I have any examples of a collar? And sometimes you have so much stuff in your studio, it's overwhelming sometimes. The amount of stuff you have in your studio to do one painting with, because you're constantly doing research. I mean, just constantly research. And research is pictorial research. You know, you want to have information that you can use to paint by. To help you paint. Actually, to tell you the truth, maybe I could paint something else. Hold on. And of course, without referring to your research, what you do is you wind up painting what I call wonky. Painting stuff don't look right, and you're not happy. So it's very important for the artist to be happy about what he's painting. So that's quite important. And because when you're happy, you just paint better. You're happy about your painting. You're proud of your painting. And you can continue to do your thing, you know, which is paint. But when you're not happy about it, there is a tendency to paint not as joyfully. And you're kind of like working, you know, it's kind of like a grind. The project turns into a grind. And you definitely don't want that to happen. Because when that starts happening, you don't want to paint the painting anymore. And your painting gets never done. A lot of paintings that I have that never gets done, at least for me anyway, I start the painting out and then I start losing the enthusiasm with the painting. For whatever reasons. There's a variety of reasons. It could be sometimes you're painting it for a certain target audience or a certain person. That person just doesn't appreciate the painting. And so you got, okay, what am I doing this painting for? So then sometimes there's a target group and you realize, well, this target group doesn't appreciate this painting. So again, what am I doing this painting for? And sometimes you're painting for a particular gallery, for example. And then the curator of that gallery or the art director, the boss of that gallery says, well, I kind of don't like this painting for this reason. And then, of course, you're like, okay, so now what am I doing this painting for? Because the main guy who is going to sell this for me is not interested in selling it. He's just not interested in the painting altogether. So then you're kind of like what I call being in a quandary, in a bind. It's like, okay, so now I'm spinning wheels here because this painting is going to live in my studio forever. I mean, I might put it in a few shows, but I don't know if anybody ever buy it. I don't know if anybody ever just show it in their gallery as a permanent part of their exhibit or anything like that. So, or a semi-permanent part of the exhibit, but they basically get the painting on retainer. You know, they get control of the painting in terms of they can show it or they don't have to show it, but it's part of what they're doing with their gallery. But anyway, you know, those are the kind of things you think about and you hope on, because a lot of times there's no guarantee that somebody would even show your work in their gallery. You know, they might be interested, but they're not interested. They have a lot of people that would love to get their work there. So why should they pick yours? What is the big deal with your work, you know? And those are all valid things, you know? Those are all valid things. So, you know, I like to stay concerned about those things, you know, when I work. And I like to think that when a person sees the work, somebody's going to want to possess the work. In other words, they're going to want to have the work. You know, control the work. The work is theirs. They take ownership of it. It is no longer yours, but it's theirs. I mean, you're the artist who originated it, but it's basically their work. And they're basically become the guardian of your work. So just like anything else, you have a dog and it's a pet, and your dog has a bunch of puppies. You like to see those puppies. They're kind of like little members of your family. You like to see those puppies find a good, loving home, like the one they could have if they would stay with the mummy dog. But because you can't have, you know, 6 puppies running all over the place, it's going to turn into dogs, and then they're going to make puppies. And then you might have like 12 puppies running around, dogs over in your house, and then next thing you know, they're going to turn to puppies, and then you're going to have like 24, and it's going to go on and on. So the whole thing is you want to make sure that those dogs find great places to stay and live and thrive and prosper and live a nice, happy, doggy life. Okay, well, your art is somewhat the same. As an artist, you want to make sure that your work is going to be appreciated by whoever it is who now possesses the work and controls the work. You want to think that they're going to take care of it, and they're going to appreciate it just as much as you, the person who created it. And that it's a good thing for them to have the work because you know that they're going to be a good caretaker of it. And even they're in a position to probably take better care of the work than you are as the artist. So I think every artist to some level is thinking that way. And so therefore, that's a good place to be when you're making your art, because now you know that that particular piece of art is going to have a place to live. It's going to have a home. It's going to be, you're not creating your work in vain. I mean, it's kind of like your kids, you know, you want your kids to grow up, go to college, have a good life, make a good living, you know, fall in love, marry the person of their dreams, and live happily ever after. I think a lot of people want their children, if they have children, to do something like that, you know? And so they want to make sure the person that they marry is a good person who's going to provide for them, just like, say, Daddy did, you know? And so Daddy did a good job, so he wants to make sure that whoever is the person that's going to get kind of charge of my daughter, well, their person's going to do a good job too. And then sometimes maybe the fear of a lot of dads is that this fellow that my daughter loves, I don't know if he's going to do so good at that. And I don't know if my daughter's thinking this thing through. You know, the way, because a lot of times you may have, you know a lot more than the daughter knows about life, even though she may think she knows more. You just simply live longer. You made her, so everything she knows, you probably are at least familiar with, even though they don't think so sometimes. So anyway, the paintings are like that, you know. You made the painting. The painting starts to take on a life of its own once you make it, you know. I mean, people will start injecting whatever into the painting. Oh, this painting is very busy. It's about, well, it's kind of Afrocentric, and it's not for everybody, and this, that. So the painting starts taking on its own persona, you know. And other people give that, just like in real life, other people give you your image. You know, as you project out a certain image. And what happens is they treat you kind of according to what you give out, but they also treat you according to how they feel about the image you give out. Some people, you might be just very confident, but then people will say, oh, that person's arrogant. They're conceited. Well, could that person also be very confident about themselves? Perhaps they're not very arrogant or conceited, but just simply very, very confident. Does that equal to arrogance? You know, those are valid questions. So not everything is always the obvious. You know, it's the way someone else basically translates whatever you do. Like, for example, some people are very, very sensitive. Let's put it that way. They're very sensitive. I'm not going to say hypersensitive, but they're just very sensitive people. Now, there's nothing wrong with being very sensitive, but as a person who is, I'm not going to say I'm sensitive, but I am sensitive to people who are sensitive. And I am a sensing type of person because I'm an artist. I think to a certain level, all artists are sensing people. However, I've learned to be, and maybe life has made me a little bit of I'm not going to say a hard edge, but I can get along with toughness, you know, if I need to. I get along with tough situations and tough people. I prefer easygoing situations, easygoing people. But I have adapted myself to get along with many scenarios. And not just when the scenario just is perfect and it's easy and this is exactly how everything's going to be and I'm going to control the situation so it's always like that. Well, I don't think life works that way. I think in often situations, you cannot control the situation 100% because you're dealing with other human beings. And the same thing with your painting. So once you release your painting, as an artist, you can't control how others are going to handle that and deal with your work. You cannot actually control that. What happens is you're kind of dependent on the person who becomes the caretaker of your work. You're kind of dependent on them to kind of do the right thing. And I think to a certain level, we all are like that. We depend on each other to be good to us. You know, to be understanding of us. To be open. And oftentimes you can make mistakes, you know. When you're dealing with other people, you can make mistakes and not treat people with that care and consideration. And you just miss it. I mean, just it's like, well, normally I would get that, but this is one instance. I missed it. The thing didn't work out like I could have done it. And for whatever purposes, whether I got it or not, it just didn't go down as good as it could have gone down. So when you're executing a piece of artwork, especially when you're in the design stage of it, you want to think about it. Before I bring this thing into the world as a piece, how is this piece of artwork going to be received? You know? It's kind of like how you're treating somebody. You know? How am I going to be received as a person? I sit in the studio all the time painting, neglecting myself. I could be dressed a lot better, but instead I'm dressed like this with paint all over me. Could be going to the gym every day, really taking care of myself, making sure I look really, really buffed and nice. But instead, I'm just painting because I don't have time to go to the gym. You know, I can say, okay, I can do at home gym, and then I can say, okay, I want to take care of myself that way. But then I run out of energy because by the time I exercise at home, it's time to paint, I'm out of energy. So it's only so much energy in one day, 24-hour period. You spend 8 of those 24 hours hopefully sleeping. So then really you only have, 16 hours left to really do anything with. You got to eat and take care of yourself and, wash up and clean up, brush your teeth and all that stuff. So what's left? You probably have about 12 hours. And that's if you don't have any kind of social life. So if you have any kind of social life, let's at least cut out 4 hours to socialize with others. So now you're left with, 8 hours. And that's basically what a normal workday is, about 8 hours. They got it figured out. So people have been doing this stuff for a long time, so they got it figured out with 8 hours. And there's not wrong with 8 hours. I mean, you gotta do the work. Most of the time there's going to be a good or product or service that you're going to trade for some goods and products and services. What we use is currency as an exchange means to say, okay, for this service that I provided, it's worth this much in currency, and I'm expected to get this much in value for whatever it is, the service or product that I was able to trade with you. And so what we do is we don't trade item for item like the barter system like we used to. We trade for a particular currency. It could be any currency. It really doesn't matter. As long as it's spendable to you and it's exchangeable for you, that is the most important part of that. Having something that is tradable, where you can easily go in, and get your value back. For example, I might sell a painting for $400, say $500. Then I might go to the store and buy $500 worth of groceries. Or say I spend only $400 or $200 on the groceries. But then I go pay an electric bill or something. Okay? So what you're doing is you're exchanging your skill and your product that you made for other things you need to get by. And that is called commerce. That is called buying and selling, trading. And like I say, it boils down to simply buying and selling. Now, a lot of us do have like a paycheck mentality towards life, especially in America, because we used to have all these great jobs that America's always had. We just go into the man. He's the guy who's carrying all the burden. And we get a paycheck. And we expect certain things. We expect our medical to be taken care of. We expect to have a good, clean place to work. We expect to be treated fairly. If there's any promotions to be given out, they should be given out fairly. I mean, we expect a whole lot of stuff. But very rarely do we ever really think, well, what does it take for a person to provide that? It's a lot of work. Now, as an artist, you're your own business. You're your own boss. You're providing those infrastructures that the 9-to-5 guy is taking for granted somebody else is doing for him or her. So again, your paintings have built into them. You want to have built into them some type of trade ability, whereas you can actually sell these things or work with them in such a way that you can be financially compensated with currency, so you can trade and get all the things you need to live basically a successful life. And in my case, in the United States, which in some states is very tough because it's expensive to live in those places. Other places is not quite as expensive. So then you got to decide, where am I going to live? To do what I want to do, how much does it cost? Who am I selling to? Well, those are things that your boss usually thinks of. As an artist, you're thinking about those things. So the last thing you want to do is be in a situation where you're making your work You're using your skill to make your work. And no one's buying them. And nobody wants them. And of course, you have nothing to trade. So what are you working for? You have all these paintings. And I go back to one of my, he was a weird artist, but he was a good artist. He had some good philosophy if you actually get into what he thought about work. I mean, he was basically mostly self-taught. It was Vincent van Gogh. I said, wasn't that the guy who chopped his ear off and he was pretty much weird? Yes, but also he painted a lot of work. But what's important about him is that he did not paint work that people bought. During his lifetime, and we hear about this a lot with artists, during their lifetime, nobody thought their work was good. Or if they thought it was good, nobody wanted to possess the work. They didn't want to own the work. They didn't want to be the guardians of that work. They didn't value the work. Let's just face it. Vincent van Gogh's work was not valued during his lifetime. He was not compensated for his work. What happened with Vincent van Gogh was he had a person, his brother, and a doctor in France, who basically, the doctor gave him shelter, a place to stay, and something to eat. His brother bought all of his art supplies for him and basically made sure he had everything he needed to paint. So his brother took care of the painting, kind of locked that down for him. Vincent van Gogh really never made any money of his own. I don't know what his brother's occupation was. I think it was some type of lawyer or something. Or maybe the brother was a businessman. I don't know. But he basically very faithfully took care of Vincent van Gogh. I mean, he had a very good relationship with his brother, who in turn basically treated him very, very graciously and nicely, which is very nice to have a brother like that. But most artists don't have a brother like that or a relative like that. Most artists basically depend on themselves working and being able to sell their work to some level so they can make a living. So that's why I say to everybody that's listening to me, please leave me a comment or send me an inbox on ideas you think there will be good selling ideas. So I can see if I have in common some similar ideas that I don't mind painting so that I can make work that is relevant and that people will actually buy and want. Because I actually don't want to be like Vincent van Gogh and make very good work though. Make very revolutionary work. I mean, his work basically changed the art world. But in his lifetime, he was not appreciated by the Standard Art Academy, nor was he appreciated by just regular people. Some people liked him. They thought he was a phenomenal artist, but they didn't put their money where their mouth was. They didn't financially support him. They just verbally supported him. And what happened was he basically lived pretty much on a haystack. He slept on a haystack every night in a barn of this doctor. I guess some nights they would let him sleep on the actual bed inside. I guess if it got cold or something, I don't know. But for the most part, I guess back then too, the average bed was hay and a sack. So we're talking the 1800s. So I do know of family members out in the country who, and some of these people are still living now. They're in there pushing 90, but their bed was basically a sack stuffed full of straw. So if you lived in a rural area and you're about 80, late 80s or 90 years old, there's a very strong chance that you actually also, your bed was just a sack stuffed with straw or some soft material. And you basically kind of molded the bed to the shape you wanted. And that's how you lived, and you didn't know anything else. I mean, today we go down to the mattress store, we get what we want, but his bed was basically in a straw sack in kind of like a barn scenario, an extra building that was more or less like a garage or a barn kind of thing. And I'm going to say more like a barn than a garage. So I'm saying that to say that this is somebody that we revere today as a genius artist. He was weird, but I've heard him referred to as a genius before in the art world. But it just amazes me that he could be referred to as a genius in the art world, but that very same art world, current to his life, did not appreciate him at all. Financially, they did nothing to keep him going, and he might have been able to live longer and create much more interesting artwork for the world to enjoy, since he was a visual arts genius. But isn't that the case with a lot of artists? We have like Jimi Hendrix. We have so many artists that wind up leaving us early. You know, you got Elvis Presley. You got a lot of them. You know, you got a lot of artists. You got Tupac Shakur. You got Nipsey Hussle. They wind up not spending all the time that they could with us. And it's a shame, because they should have been able to get a better deal in terms of appreciation without frustration, and without being cut off, you know, by negative issues. And I consider these negative currents. I mean, I think that, you know, I think with capitalism is not good. You know, you can argue about communism because we're not getting information about Corona out of China like we should. They're giving us false information. So the only information we can really go on is what's going on in Italy and North Korea and France and places like that, where the coronavirus hit early, but so we can actually learn from them. I mean, we could learn so much more from China, but they're kind of like lying to the world. I think it's just a shame and embarrassment over the fact that it did happen with them, and they didn't handle it well. They let it get kind of out of control, and now it's plaguing the whole planet. So I think they're playing a little bit of a blame game here, blaming the United States, and I've heard all this stuff, the CIA. I just don't buy it, because this thing is hitting powerful people just as much as it's hitting the lowly people. So I'm not buying the fact that because I mean, a virus can kill a CIA agent just as fast and easy as it can kill the man living under the bridge. So, and I don't think it has a certain ethnicity or race that it targets or doesn't target, or a certain group that have a special bulletproof virus-proof vest on because of some powers that they have. I just don't think that's the case. I think if you get exposed to it, you're going to have to deal with it. Now, I know a lot of people will argue with me on that one. And I can understand, but we ain't going to ever know until we get down the road on this anyway. When I say down the road, I mean some time got to go by, and we got to see what happens. It's a pandemic, and there's been lots of them. Pandemics are not uncommon. If you just Google pandemic, list of pandemics, it's almost not every 100 years. You get something, but it just hasn't hit the United States like that. We've been lucky. We've been very lucky, and we're so lucky to the fact that we really do think in the United States that nothing can happen to us. But I'm going to consider it just being very fortunate, because a lot of times these things seem to start in other countries. And even though this one did start in another country, it is in the United States now, and it's in big time. It's here, big time, and this is a nasty little thing. And we have to do some things unprecedented to get this thing beat as a nation. In one sense, this could actually get the nation to come together. If handled badly, it could tear the nation apart. So let's see what our leaders actually would do. So-called people that's in leadership position. Let's just call it that. Let's see if they get their act together and get us out of this mess. Let's see if they can do that. And if they can't do that, I'll say the government needs to be completely done over, because what good is it doing for us? Because that's your real enemy. The real enemy is just situations you cannot control. It ain't necessarily other people at this point. We're not fighting a civil war in this country. Nobody wants to fight anybody and kill anybody else. Unless you're kind of missing a screw, or you done just lost it. You're gone crazy. And you just beyond, hope. Yeah, maybe so. You might be like, oh man, the world's over. So I'm just going to just scrap everything and start over. And then you go up in a church somewhere and blow everybody away. Or a synagogue or whatever. That ain't the answer. I don't think you're going to get anywhere with that, but dead or life in prison or a nice couple of volts of electric chair energy going through you. I mean, if that's what you want, go for it. However, is that what you should be going after? I mean, is that the answer? Is that a solution? I'll say no. I don't think that's a solution at all. I think that's just a cop-out. I think that this may turn out to be a world reset, though. This pandemic might turn out to be a world reset where financial institutions, governments, nations may crumble if this is handled too badly by too many. And the system that we know today may completely crumble. That is possible. It's very much possible. And I think a lot of people fear that. And they rightfully so. However, I'm supposed to be talking about painting, don't I? I'm not supposed to be talking about a whole bunch of other stuff. And so I'm not going to talk about other stuff. I'm going to keep this on painting. But nobody's in the room at the moment at the time anyway, so I guess it don't matter what I say, actually. I could probably say anything. I mean, there's nobody here, but I'm sure somebody might tune in later and catch a gander on what I'm saying. And you got to remember, when I'm painting, I'm liable to say almost anything because there's a plethora of thoughts going through my brain. Maybe normally I would be dismissing. So don't take anything I say too serious. Because firstly, I think life is not that serious, really. I think life is something that it is what you make it. That's what I think it is. It is what you make it. If you make it jacked up, if you think it's jacked up, it's going to be jacked up. Because that's your lens, that's your perspective. But if you make it nice and fun, you're going to seek those things. And your life is going to be nice and fun. So basically, your life is how you think. So that's why I tell people, think positively. And if you have too much negativity around you, try to get rid of it. Don't be so dogmatic about life, That's why I'm not really a big kind of religious kind of guy anymore. Not to say I used to be, but I used to be. Big time. However, I've changed that perspective because I think we have a lot of like stuff where we stop thinking and we just start relying on the scripture says, or this preacher says, or this mullah, whoever he is, says, or my political leader says. And that stuff starts to get, you're a programmed person. And you're not thinking anymore. And even though some of that stuff is great guidelines, excellent guidelines, if it has morals and ethics to it, I think morals and ethics is the key to a successful civilization. I mean, belief system is good because if it's going to keep you moral and keep you ethical, it's a good thing. But just know that you don't actually have to have a dogmatic system that's made for people with weak minds. You don't have to have a dogmatic system. You could think that these morals and ethics is good for society. But you don't have to believe that some dude is sitting on a throne, watching you all the time with this big old beard, mustache and whatnot. And he's controlling everything. And all the mistakes is happening down here and all the jacked upness is happening. He's controlling all that somehow. I don't think that's happening. I think there's something else happening. I'm not going to say I know what's happening, because then I'll be doing the same thing, making some up to get people satisfied, to explain some stuff that they don't understand themselves. Because that's mostly what it is you don't understand something and somebody wrote something that makes a little bit of sense to you. And since everybody else thinks it's true, well, by Job, I'm going to believe it too. And I'm using something from the Bible because it's cultural. It's what we learned in our culture. Well, what grandma taught us, what mama and daddy taught us, therefore it must be. Well, not necessarily. Especially if grandma and daddy, they were just meager middle-class people with a humble outlook on life. But they were just good people. They wanted some moral dignity in the family and in the community. So they heard some things that the local, clergy or whoever was saying. They thought it was good. They adhered to it and they raised their family that way. That's good. I mean, that's a very, very good thing. I mean, it's nothing at all wrong with that. And therefore, that's why I think, I know a lot of people don't like churches, but I think that they're good for that reason. But where they get bad at it is when it starts to become dogma. And people start shutting down their ability to think, and they actually, instead of looking at everything metaphorically like it was meant to be, to learn lessons on how you're supposed to treat other people and how you're supposed to be, it turns into, oh, this is literal. This actually is the thing that is the most powerful, and this is everybody else is jacked up, and if you're not this way, then you're going to go to a certain place and burn up forever. I think you're starting to get into a cartoon character scenario right there. Because there's absolutely zero proof that any of that is going to happen, or any of that is possible, or any of that is real. Zero proof. What you have is somebody wrote something, a feeling. Therefore, since we are creatures of our emotions, we feel like this thing's right. Therefore, it must be. Then people will say, well, this happened in my life, and that must mean that this happened, because then I said this and this happened. That ain't proof of that either. That just means that happened and then this happened. But most likely it happened at a certain place in your life where you start coming into maturity. And there's many roads for that, because you was in another culture. Say if you was raised in an Arabic culture or a Hindu culture or Buddhist culture or any other culture, it would be some other device built into the culture that you would lean on to get through that same crisis, and you would believe that that is the gospel truth on it. And this must be true because of that. But it just so happened you're raised in this particular culture. Therefore, when you went through that period of your life, and usually it's around the time when people are starting to get serious. I want to have a family, and I want to have a baby. I want to have a house with a picket fence. And I just want to do what mom and daddy always told me to do. And since mom and dad always went to church and they always said, this is good, I suppose this is what I have to do. So then we take that as 100% truth. And to you at that time in your development, it probably is 100% truth for you. To somebody else in another part of the world, in another culture, it is not. And it's not because they're a heathen or a sinner or a damnable soul or whatever. It's simply because they don't have exposure to what you have exposure to. Therefore, they don't see the world the way you see it. They see the world a completely different way. And then to them, perhaps, you're the heathen. And so it goes on and on and on. So at some point, as the world is starting to come together in the modern age, we can fly anywhere. That's how the Ebola virus flew to us. We can fly anywhere now. Even the communist countries that we used to not be able to do. And guess what? They can come to us. Yes, they can. And they can start being capitalistic Democrats from that point on. Democratic people. I was a socialist communist. Now I am transformed. I am super Democrat. Or super whatever you are, you know. Super democracy. You know, I'm pro-democracy. Every man gets a vote and we are equally represented by our votes. But even though, I think really when the politicians got into office, and they start changing the laws, because it used to be politicians made about $50,000. But then when they started getting lobbyists, when they let the lobbyists in, that's when the country basically started to melt down, start to be bought wholesale on the market. Because now if you have money, you can influence power. Before then, it was the opinion of the culture. The man's vote actually meant something because you couldn't buy that. There was one thing you couldn't buy in America, in a capitalistic system. You couldn't buy that politician. You couldn't buy that vote. But now, that's what a lobby is. A lobbyist is a person who can buy the politician. And even now, what we got is even a worse extreme of that, where the politician, the lobbyist can get elected wholesale, representing his company or his whatever his interest is. And this is the mess that we have today. That's what's happened, and that wasn't the case all the time. And usually when you give a certain interest group to take hold of a very powerful country, you get a major war. Or you get a lot of wars. So we can see on the horizon, we can see this happening already, boatloads of wars everywhere. People threatening, I'm going to use my nukes. No, I'm going to use my nukes first. Is this a biological weapon? I don't know. It looks like one, you know. Nobody trusted nobody anymore. There's no sense of, you're a decent person, I'm a decent person. It's basically now, it's a whole lot of daggone deception going on and lack of trust. No loyalty. And I'm not going to say loyalty like blind faith loyalty. I mean loyalty to the average guy who goes out there and works. And those 9 to 5 people that I was talking about. Goes out and faithfully do what he's asked to do. Or that soldier that goes out, put his life on the line in some place that probably once he gets there, he wish he was not there. But there he is there. And then he makes it feel right because he says, okay, well, I'm serving my country, I'm doing this. They tell you a whole lot of stuff like that to make you feel good about it. But it ain't pleasant. It ain't pleasant. So you just got to deal with it. But then you like it because it's like a club. You know, we're the club of guys who go and do the stuff, the physical stuff. The stuff that's needed. You know, I'm the guy who's got my ear to the ground. I'm the guy who's got my hand on the work that the government needs to get done. That is a good feeling because you're useful to somebody. But if the people you're being useful to are now bought by corrupt people, well, that was something for the past. But now it's not. It's not the thing that we thought it was. So we can't associate the patriotism to that anymore, because patriotism is now false because you've been bought. So it's not a patriotism. You're going to be patriot to the corporate owner. That's what you're going to be. So again, it boils down to, well, let me tie this back into painting again. How do I do that? Well, essentially, I can't tie that to painting. I'm just ranting now. And I'm getting political, so I don't want to do that because I don't want to tick anybody off. Sorry if I tick you off. I'm just talking. Like I said, if you don't, you disagree with me, you're free to leave a comment with your point of view. I will not delete it. I will not get upset with you. I might debate with you, but I might not get angry with you over that. I promise. Because everybody has a right for their opinion. Everybody has their feelings on things. And nobody should really, and that's, I think, what America is all about, is that even though we're different and we're diverse people, we should be respecting each other's differences and different opinion. And, the majority rules. Not the gerrymandered majority, but the actual majority. Those are the rules we go by. Because during the time where, say, one group had to kind of grin and bear it because the other group was in charge. But now if a different group gets in charge, then the first group has been a little bit discharged. Now it's their turn to grin and bear it a bit. That's only fair. However, now in terms of also, when you're doing art, I know how to tie it into art now. When you're doing art, it's the same way. You should be making your art so that people will buy it, so people will want it. So you're not ticking off the wrong people. Because the people who you think will buy your art might not be the ones who actually buy it. They might give you some compliments here and there, or they might not even care about your art, really. They're just curious a little bit. So then as an artist, you have to say, well, where are my loyalties going to be? My loyalty is going to be to the making the kind of images, or actually your loyalties should be to yourself. In my opinion, as an artist, your loyalties should be to you. You should really make the stuff you want to create. Just like Vincent van Gogh, I think, even though people say he was crazy, he did have a good philosophy. You should be, no matter if you make money off your work or not, it's a sellout as an artist. You're selling yourself out as an artist because, in essence, you're not getting bought by somebody. You're not getting bought by the industry. You're going to make your work, and your work is going to exist. But what you want to do is, long after you're not here, though, you want to make sure there's somebody taking care of your work and presenting it to the art community, putting it somewhere, until somebody does come along who appreciates your work. And they eventually will, especially if your work is ahead of its time, or even work that was medium, you consider like medium work. It wasn't the best work, but it's period work. Say period work from, say, not even the colonial periods, but if you was an artist in America during the colonial periods, you're a relevant artist because it just weren't that many artists. It was just, this country was so raw that we really didn't have, we're more practical. We just didn't have the space for art because essentially people was trying to survive. People was trying to live. And when people are trying to live, the arts just is secondary to that. So, but at a certain point in the development of the United States, we began to get to the point where we started getting prosperous. And of course, the arts started taking off in this country. And at that point, I mean, we had like Peggy Guggenheim, for example. Without her, which she's a philanthropist, she would we consider a billionaire. And she supported a lot of artists. She just, for example, Jackson Pollock, who in Virginia Commonwealth University, one of the famous art department there is where my alma mater is. She supported Jackson Pollock. She basically bought him a home somewhere up in like New Jersey somewhere, or upstate New York. And he lived there with his wife, who was also an artist. And that's how he made all of the famous paintings that we see today. And without her, there would be no Jackson Pollock, literally. And a lot of American culture would not be the same. Especially when it comes down to the visual arts. It just simply would not be the same. And I think there may be a lack of people like that in the world today, in the art community. I think you have some, but they definitely don't cover everybody. I like to have some to cover me, actually. But you just don't have them. I mean, a lot of people, they're looking for investments. And of course, what the investment has to do, it has to make them a lot of money. They weren't looking for the thing that's going to give them the most money back. But, and that's why I like to paint Kemet, because I think the kings and pharaohs, they weren't looking for what was giving them necessarily the most back. They were looking for the things that would illustrate the kingdom the best. What was going to represent the culture at the time better, Building this pyramid or building this temple, would this really represent my era to the top level that it can represent? And the answer to that is yes. But then he had to commission artists. We know about Imhotep. And he had to commission some of the smartest, best people. Imhotep might be the Leonardo da Vinci of his day. He might be the Sir Isaac Newton of his day. Because he is a person mentioned by name. And I'm sure there was a plethora of people. There was just boatloads of people in Kemet. But back then, a lot of people didn't sign their name. The pharaoh signed their name to everything. But the pharaoh, this particular pharaoh that commissioned him, thought so much of him. He must have been really a genius that he must have been a really good friend of the pharaoh. So here's the pharaoh, the patron of the arts. So some of you guys that really want to be a Haru type of person, well, the Kemet kings patronize the arts. You can see, matter of fact, that's how we know about them, through their artwork. And if they didn't do that, we would have no clue about ancient Kemet today. We would have no clue. There's other civilizations that probably didn't have the type of visual arts they had, like in Kemet. And guess what? We have no idea about these civilizations. We literally have no idea about them. Because they didn't make the type, the leaders, or the people that could, did not patronize the artists and their culture the way they should have. So essentially their culture has been forgotten, or the finer tuned things of their culture has gone missing, has been forgotten. You might have the basics because you see the ruins of the cities, but you just don't see enough artifacts left of what these people did. And that's where the noble people of your culture, the wealthier people, come in. And they support the arts. Because these people, because they've been blessed with this fortune, are becoming kind of like the stewards of society. And without them, a lot of society would just simply disappear with time and go into obscurity, including themselves. I mean, the reason we know about people like Lorenzo de' Medici of the Renaissance, because he was a huge patron of the arts of Europe. He was a huge patron. And so we know about him because of that. And we kind of take that advantage for granted, because what we do is sit there and say, oh yeah, Lorenzo de' Medici, he was this guy, he was this and that. But we don't understand that he put his money where his mouth was. He basically took care of a lot of artists. Basically, he took care of Michelangelo. He took care of Leonardo. He took care of Brunelleschi. He took care of a lot of them. And basically, he made sure there was a thriving art community in Florence. Without him, Florence wouldn't have been really on the map. Maybe Milan, maybe Rome, some other places, but not Florence. So it takes a person with a vision to create a culture. And I believe that's what we had in the 1970s and 80s. I believe there's an individual that's no longer with us who created all that wonderful energy of the 1970s, actually from the 60s. This person probably was on the scene in the 60s, partly responsible for that. Through the 70s, through the 80s, and so on, and probably just recently, I'm just saying sometime in 2000 died, because it seems like to me, I mean, this is just my opinion, that the art, I mean, I'm talking about, you can call it American genre, or American pop, or American whatever. It's kind of taken a dive. And it's become kind of like the I'm not going to say that we're better than the other parts of the world, but the ideas is coming out, it's sounding too, it's seeming too kind of like basic. It just don't have that zing to it. So I believe there was an individual. I don't know who that person is necessarily, because I don't necessarily track in those circles. I'm pretty sure that some of you guys that maybe do might know who that individual might be. And they're responsible for creating an environment, creating the great music and the great art and the great movies and television shows that we experienced through the 60s, through the 70s, and on through the 80s. I'm pretty sure of that. Because I can feel it. Now, I'm not trying to date myself or anything. As you know, I'm only 25 years old, as I tell everybody. But I feel like this happened. You know, I definitely feel like that's something that went down in the program. You know, it went down in the neighborhood, so to speak. And this person just quietly just bowed out. I don't know if they quietly, but they bowed out. But whoever took over in that person's place just won't the equivalent. And like I say, it's felt, it's observed. I'm pretty sure I'm not the only one. I mean, I don't know if the young teeny boppers, I call people teeny boppers, I hope I'm not insulting anybody, but I don't know if the younger people even are aware of that. I think they think what they're doing has been always the best, and it is going to be the best, and etc. But I would argue that point. I definitely would argue that. I guess every generation thinks that their stuff is always the best. The new stuff is kind of weird and not really the best. Maybe so. Don't know. But that's my opinion anyway. That's my opinion. Okay, so let's see. What was I updating on? I was updating on a lot of stuff. And right now I'm going like wet over dry with some glazes here. I have the tendency to do that just with little light glazes, one over the other, kind of build up my my surfaces here. Changing the tone around, back and forward, back and forward. Try not to dirty up anything too much though. Sometimes there's some colors, no matter how long they've been on there, they just, and depending on how you put them on and what medium you use and whatnot, they just don't want to dry right. You don't want it set up all the way sometimes. But, you know, sometimes if you move too fast, you actually do that to yourself. So what you see that I've done, I've kind of updated the collar on her somewhere. Is the collar is starting to pop more. And what I'm doing is I'm just adding more and more details to it. And I'm going to go back and forth with that until that is in real nice. And probably I'll be using my really nice number 00 brush. All of my 00 saber hairs. My 2 Italian ones and this one Select. I forget who makes it, but it's a very cheap brush, but I like it also. Sometimes it doesn't matter how much you spend for the brush or who makes it. It's just the brush holds out of it or it doesn't, you know. And the way you find out about that is you just experiment buying different brushes and then you kind of just stick with the ones that's getting you somewhere. At least that's what I do. I stick with the brushes that get me somewhere. Then, of course, I do take care of my brushes. I clean my brushes after every session. And I will probably do a video on brush cleaning techniques. And I'll just do techniques probably when I start getting to the close of this painting. I start doing videos on techniques and things like that that I do that I think is important. And my techniques are, you know, I learned most of my techniques in college. But then there was a lot of techniques I was doing way before college, you know. Just on my own, by myself, I just kind of self-taught. So many things are self-taught, and then many things are, you know, you had a professor that comes in with a lot of blah, blah, blah. And he says, okay, class, this is how you do this. And, you know, back in the day, you're in art class, and that's what they're doing. For all it's worth. And then a lot of stuff you just pick up through being in a classroom with other painters, seeing what works for them, and they're seeing what you do that might work with them, and vice versa. And you just learn, you know, you learn. So what I'm basically doing now is just going in and just touching on this collar. Really just putting in the shadows at this level to kind of make some of these little small inlays of a stone kind of pop out. So some of this work is very meticulous, and I'm using a very small brush. Actually, I'm gonna put my Select brush down because it is not fine enough. And I'm going with my Spanish brush, my Fresco brush, or is this Italian brush? I forget. All of this stuff is worn off on it, so I don't really know what it is now at this point. It's either going to be a Barcelona, I think it's made in Barcelona. But I think I bought it because it was made in Barcelona, but I also bought it because it was a small tip. I also bought some cheap ones at the same time with small tips on them. When I say small tips, I'm talking about a round sable number 0 or a round sable number 00. And so I think I just put down my number 0. And now I have my number 00. And I'm mixing a little bit of yellow ochre mixed with Mars Black. And I'm using that into the shingles. It's mostly yellow ochre. Into the shadow part of the inlay. And I already have yellow there, so I'm trying to leave some yellow. And this brush also is making a line that's a little bit too thick. And really, I want to really be able to control this line with a nice thin line. So actually right now it's doing pretty good. I think I got the thickness of the paint just right. The amount of medium that's in it. It's a little on the thin side, but it's painted, it's flowing on the painting very nicely. So that's kind of nice. So I'm going to continue with this one. Sometimes with some of the 00 or 000 brushes, they paint such a little bit of paint you can load it with I don't like to paint with them all the time because I have to keep reloading and reloading and reloading. And it's a little frustrating, but you can get some really nice details with it. Now I'm going to get my Series 7 Winsor Newton brush. I know because that's black. I can't confuse my Winsor Newtons. They got these black handles. This is the Series 7. I have to admit, this is my favorite detail brush. I will say that much. And you can see when the other brushes don't quite give me what I want, what I go to, this Winsor Newton number 00 round sable. And it allows me to paint that detail. And really, I want to get more of these brushes. But right now, my budget is not permitting. And the coronavirus, even if I did go and say, forget the budget, I'm just going to take it from somewhere else and get this brush. Coronavirus is not permitting. I don't want to go down to the Plaza Art. But then again, you got Amazon delivering. But then again, great day is Amazon. Where's the brush coming from? Was the person coughing that put the brush in a package? I don't know what protocol Amazon has, so I guess I just go Amazon, let them deliver it to the house, and then that way at least I don't have to walk into somebody's cloud nest of cough in the art store somewhere. And or just deal with the general public anyway. Take a chance in the parking lot. It could be anywhere. You can go put some money in the parking meter. Then somebody coughed on that. So the coronavirus could be, it could be anywhere. It's like, where's the booger man? You know, some kind of some crazy stuff scenarios this is going down right now. It's like, oh my, where's Mr. Corona at? Before that, I had some buddies from, I guess they're from Mexico, El Salvador. I went to a party. Everybody had a Corona. They would say, hey, Corona, want a Corona? No, that's all right, buddy. I don't want a Corona. I really don't drink, like that. And so that's all I knew what Corona was until this coronavirus. So when I first started hearing it, I was saying, okay, coronavirus? I mean, is this some Mexican, is a virus in a beer or something? I mean, what's going on? What are we talking about here? And as it turns out, the corona turns out to be the name. I don't know how a virus gets a Latin or a Spanish or kind of name, but somehow this virus got this name, corona. Which I don't know who names these things. Who names the viruses? I mean, is it somebody's job to just name the viruses in the world? Okay, you are going to be Mr. Corona because you're killing this many people, so we're going to name you Corona. I mean, now I see a lot of the names now that got these kind of like real cryptic medical kind of names, like 3CPO and whatnot, and R2D2 kind of names. Like COVID-19 and whatnot. It sounds like something out of a Star Trek movie that was going to attack. Like the attack robot, COVID-19. Came from another planet and programmed to, destroy, and lost his mission. But anyway, what I'm doing now is just going around painting the shadows around all of these inlays of this blue color that I have, and leaving the yellow in the background kind of like as a reveal color, for the gold inlay. And then I'm going to let this set up, and then I'm going to paint into that. So this is a bit of, I'm not going to say meticulous painting, but you are painting around each little stone in this particular gown, and this particular collar. There's another way I could have gone about painting this painting. I could have just colored everything in as I went, kind of left to right, and not did any background blocking at all. Just painted it exactly like the tone I saw. And then try to just almost sharp detail, almost just from the very beginning. That's a way to paint. And I like to experiment. And I might paint like that next to see what is the best way, see what's the fastest way, with the look, what's the difference in the look and the aesthetics of it. A lot of times when I do that, I will go to a smaller painting and try a different style. If I like that style, I'll try it on a bigger painting, a much larger painting. And I kind of got my painting back into full swing just lately. It's not like I've been like swinging on the painting for years and years and years at a time. I mean, just lately, I say lately, in the last 2 years, I've been getting my paintings back into full swing because I've been doing other things instead to make money. Other things kind of art related or visual arts related, but nonetheless, other things to make money other than painting, in particular, painting. So, you know, like I've been doing cinematography, I've been doing graphic arts and things like that. And of course, what I want to do, because I am an artist it's in my blood. I mean, it's in me. So from the very beginning, I am a visual artist. I mean, I think when I was young, my parents had a Bible on the front coffee table of the house, and it had Renaissance paintings in them. I mean, it was really, really an elaborate, very, very, I don't even know what they did with that, because I would like to see that, because I think since a young age, I've been really, really influenced by that. And I always think on that, actually. And to tell you the truth, next time I go over my parents' house, I'm going to see if I can find that and just look at it so I can just conjure up some memories there. Because I don't even know if they still have it. I'm going to ask my mom and dad. Probably my dad knows where it is. Next time I get out there, I'm going to see if I can find it, just to kind of take a picture. I want to take a picture of it because it's part of my memory. It's part of my what helped to form me in terms of becoming an artist and whatnot. So as I'm doing more art, I've been more and more aware of things that help develop me, you know, through the times. And just been more and more aware of that, you know. And especially as I've been coming to the point where, okay, again, you know, whether I want to be more like some of the artists, like for example, like Vincent van Gogh, don't make that much money during your lifetime, but your art is relevant. You made enough good art, and you didn't know you were going to go down in history as a top artist when you were living, but you are going down in history as a top artist. So, you know, that's just how it is, you know. I mean, that's how it is. So, so there you are with that. And I'm just going to keep on chugging at this. And I put some more yellow ochre on. And I'm mixing that with raw umber. Actually, I thought I was mixing it with Mars Black. I'm actually mixing it with raw umber. And I'm getting it to kind of like, not necessarily a runny paste, but I'm getting it to a nice, good consistency where it goes on somewhat opaquely, but also somewhat fluidly as well. And so I'm just getting enough medium in there for that, because I do want to be able to paint very, you know, very detailed shapes with this. And I want the brush and the paint to go exactly where I want it to go. And see, this brush is an excellent brush, but you can't load this 00 brush, the 00 round brush up with a whole lot and paint for a long time. Like, this brush is good for like one inlay stone that's the size of a green pea on this. And basically what I'm doing is kind of painting a shadow around that stone to give it like a 3D embossed impression. And this load up that I do in terms of the type of line I want to put down, it's good basically for one. And then sometimes I do get two. Sometimes I have the brush overloaded where the paint's coming out too globby, not the precision line that I want. And I really do want a precision line. I don't want a globby line. I do want lines at this point because it's just a little slither of a shadow. The shadows are lines in this case because they are going around the contour of the stone. And so you want to be very, very sure that you are painting the contours correctly. And you don't want to rush it. You have to be patient because if you rush it, you start getting a choppy line, or the hairs of your brush comes out split and you get like a double line. So what I have a tendency to do is roll the brush into on the palette into the paint. And then what I do, that way the brush kind of gets into a little point. And then I just simply put down the line quality that I want from there.